welcome everybody to this webinar for parish and town councils on local nature recovery strategies in Sussex. My name's Kate Cole. I'm the county ecologist for East Sussex County Council. So I am leading on the local nature recovery strategy for East Sussex and Brighton and Hove. Also with me today, we have Don Baker, whose picture I can't see. Is he on the screen, Rob? Hopefully, yes. Don Baker is from West Sussex County Council, so he is leading on the local nature recovery strategy for West Sussex. And then also here we have Julie Middleton from the Sussex Nature Partnership. So she's working with Don and I to help develop these strategies together. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to start off by giving you a presentation, telling you what local nature recovery strategies are, why we need them, what the process is, what they will do, possibly more importantly, what they won't do, something about the engagement approach, and then how you can get involved. The presentation will take sort of 20-30 minutes because we want to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. I'm going to be giving the presentation on behalf of both of the local responsible authorities, both the strategy areas, but Don and Julie will join me when we come to the questions so that you can speak to both the responsible authorities for East and West. Just a little bit about housekeeping. Also on the call, beavering away in the background, we have Diana and Rob Allcroft, who are the hosts of this webinar. If you have any technical questions, if you're struggling to see or hear, then please put it in the chat and Di and Rob will do their best to help you. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A button. Please use that to ask questions as they come to you. You can ask them anonymously if you want to. You can also see other people's questions and you can give them a thumbs up if you think, yep, that's what I wanted to ask. And then the more thumbs up it gets, the higher up the list it will go. We will try and get through as many of the questions as we can. If there's any that we don't get to, or there's any that we just can't answer today, we will take them all away and we will do our best to answer them, and we will post those questions and answers up on the website, so you will get them. A recording of this webinar will be uploaded to the website in the next few days, and we will also be sending these slides around to you. So there are some links to the surveys and to the website within these slides, so you'll get the slides and be able to follow those links. So what are local nature recovery strategies? Basically, they're a new statutory process that has come out of the Environment Act, and they are about agreeing at the local level what the priorities and actions are that we need to drive nature recovery across Sussex. So they're a legal requirement. They're being done across England at a landscape scale, primarily at the county level, though East Sussex includes Brighton and Hove as well, and they're being collaboratively produced. That's the really key point here. It's a local strategy for local wildlife being developed with local people and local organisations. That's the really key point here. There are 48 of these strategies being developed across the country. West Sussex is number 47 and East Sussex is number 48. So they've clearly left the best till last. And they are being led by responsible authorities who are appointed by the Secretary of State. So East Sussex County Council is the responsible authority for the strategy for East Sussex and Brighton and Hove, and West Sussex County Council is the responsible authority for the West Sussex Local Nature Recovery Strategy. But when they're complete, all of these strategies will join up together to support what they're thinking of as a seamless countrywide nature recovery network. Now, although we're having two local nature recovery strategies across Sussex, because there's a sort of a history of Sussex working together and we have a lot of pan-Sussex stakeholders, we're committed to working very closely together across the East and West to develop these two strategies as closely as possible. But we're doing that under the banner of Sussex Nature Recovery. So because we're working in this collaborative way, we have a board, a strategy board that sits over the top that has the two responsible authorities, East and West Sussex County Councils, along with Brighton and Hove City Council and Natural England, who are supporting us. And they're overseeing the process and spending on the budget and all those sorts of things. Alongside that, we have a working group. So that's where that group is there to provide input and guidance and to help us develop these strategies. Within that group, we've got representatives of the key stakeholder groups and government agencies across Sussex. So we've got the Sussex Nature Partnership, we've got the Sussex Wildlife Trust, who are representing all the environmental non-governmental organisations. We've got the 3 national landscapes. We've got the Sea Fisheries Committee, so they're sort of bringing in the marine element. We've got farmer and landowner representatives and various others on that group as well. Now, the regulations put a very specific duty on local planning authorities. It makes them supporting authorities. They have a specific role to play in the process. So we also have a supporting authority group. So that includes all the districts and boroughs across Sussex, along with the South Downs National Park and Natural England. And again, that allows them to input into the process and it brings them along with us. It makes sure they're engaged throughout the development of the strategies. We're working very closely with our neighbours, particularly with Surrey and Hampshire and Kent, to make sure that these strategies are aligned. And that's particularly important when we have any sort of cross-border issues. And then finally, we have a technical review panel. This is a small panel of local experts who are going to peer review the baseline evidence, the baseline information that we're pulling together to inform the development of the strategy. So whilst it's the Environment Act that's the primary legislation that says you have to have a local nature recovery strategy, there is secondary legislation and guidance which tells us exactly what the process is for producing a strategy and what it should contain. And then alongside that, there's a whole suite of non-statutory guidance. So there's guidance on species recovery, because the strategies are very much habitat-based, engaging with the land management sector, identifying and agreeing priorities and measures, advice on governance and partners, and national environmental objectives. But there's still some guidance that we're expecting. Irreplaceable habitats, so this is things like ancient woodland and veteran trees. There is some guidance that has been published alongside biodiversity net gain, which is another requirement that comes out of the Environment Act. But we are expecting further consultation on this later in the year. The statutory instruments and guidance for biodiversity net gain has been published, so that's something that we need to be mindful of. Sorry. But we're also waiting for guidance on data standards advice, mapping of measures, and local planning authority guidance as well. So why do we need these strategies? Well, we're in a biodiversity crisis. We know that 1 in 6 species is at risk of being lost from Great Britain. We've seen something like a 55% decline in farmland birds. And we are officially one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. So we need to work together locally to identify and agree where and how we need to act to support nature's recovery. So this is the process that's set out in the regulations and guidance. The diagram on the right comes from the statutory guidance, and this shows you that it's a step-by-step process that we go through that takes you to the local nature recovery strategy. And the strategy itself is formed of 2 parts. There's a local habitat map and a statement of biodiversity priorities. So the steps lead us to those bits, and those bits together form the local nature recovery strategy. So it's about mapping the existing valuable areas for nature, gathering together what the issues are that are most important to local people and local communities, agreeing together what the priorities are for nature's recovery, and then we can map where we've got proposals for creating or improving habitats and species and delivering the wider benefits that a healthy environment brings. And then that strategy will need to be reviewed. This is the start of a rolling process. It'll be reviewed every 3 to 10 years. So along the bottom, that just shows that step-by-step process in a linear form. So steps 1 and 3, that's about developing the high-level evidence. That's about mapping what we know we've already got, describing the area, what's important about it, and describing what the opportunities might be to support nature recovery. Then step 4 is the key stakeholder engagement part. That's where we are going to be working with you to agree what our priorities are for nature recovery and to think about what the measures might be to deliver that. Then that information will help us map areas that could become of importance for biodiversity, and all those steps will lead us to the local nature recovery strategy, to the statement of priorities and the habitat map. Just a little bit on definitions here, because we're sort of throwing around terms like priorities and measures, and they're not necessarily how you would automatically think of those words. So priorities are the habitats and species that the strategy will focus on supporting. And that's based on the best available ecological evidence and on the views of local people and groups and organisations in Sussex. So, for example, a priority might be identified as increasing our populations of starlings or better connecting our existing woodland. The measures are the actions that we need to take to deliver those priorities and the benefits that come from them. And the key word here is achievable. We need to have some certainty that those measures can actually be delivered. So examples of measures here might be planting a wildflower meadow to help pollinators, or creating wetlands to reduce flood risk, or planting trees to connect woodlands together. It's really important here to recognise that we're not starting from a blank sheet. There's an awful lot of stuff which is already happening across Sussex. There's lots of organisations working. There's lots of people who've already been thinking about what the priorities are for nature recovery. So one of the first things that we've been doing is reviewing all the existing plans and policies and strategies and trying to identify what the existing priorities are. So we've been looking at protected landscape plans. We've been looking at local plans and green infrastructure strategies and tree strategies, catchment management plans, all those sorts of things. But we're going beyond the terrestrial, we're looking towards the sea as well. So we've also been looking at shoreline management plans and marine plans as well. As part of this process, we've also been looking at neighbourhood plans where we have them, which have actually been really helpful, because that gets down to the really local detail of what priorities are for local communities. And a particular interest for us is our local green space designation. So I'm going to come back to those a little bit later. So what is a local nature recovery strategy meant to deliver? It's all about being bigger and better and more joined up. If your habitats are bigger and better connected, then the species and the wildlife can better move through the environment. And what we do locally will help meet national targets. So a couple of the targets are here. It's things like reducing the risk of species extinction, or something called 30 by 30. This is a target to have 30% of England protected by 2030. But it's not just about wildlife for wildlife's sake. It's also about the wider benefits that a healthy environment gives us. So it's things like health and well-being, clean air and water, healthy soils, flood prevention, carbon storage, all those sorts of things. So what will they do? Again, the important thing here is a local nature recovery strategy. It's not a delivery plan. It's not a management plan. It's a strategy. It's a framework that all of this existing work and existing projects can sort of sit within. But what it's meant to do is help direct future effort and funding. So, for example, biodiversity net gain, which is something connected to the planning system. It won't say this is where you need to deliver biodiversity net gain. This is the perfect site for it. But what it will do is to help direct funding into the areas where you'll get the greatest benefit. Similarly, ELM, so that's environmental and management schemes. It will play a role in guiding the funding through that scheme. It'll inform the planning process, and all public authorities have a duty to biodiversity, so it will help inform that. Nature-based solutions, this is about where you use natural processes to undertake engineering, if you like. So it's planting trees in the right place to reduce flood risk or for carbon storage. And it will help inform their delivery, so that'll help direct funding from the private sector. So part of it will be about aiding collaboration. It'll help the public and the private and the voluntary sector work better together for nature's recovery and focus some collective effort. So it's really about targeting. It's making sure the right things are done in the most effective areas. So what's in scope of local nature recovery strategy and what's not? So what the strategies will do is bring forward opportunities to create or improve habitats and support species recovery across Sussex. So it's about capturing deliverability and providing evidence to inform decisions. So it's really about opportunities rather than constraints. What they can't do is protect more spaces for nature in Sussex. So being mapped or identified within the strategy doesn't confer any new protections on land. We can't dictate how land is used or limit the choices that land managers have on their land. And measures that are put forward are recommendations, they're not obligations. But they are a material consideration in the plan making process. So it comes back to this identifying opportunities for better effort. When we come to the maps, it's actually the guidelines, the statutory guidance that we have is quite prescriptive about what we can and can't map. So there are two parts to the local habitat map. The first part is mapping existing areas of importance for biodiversity. And the only things that we can include in that map are designated sites and irreplaceable habitats. We're not allowed to put anything else on that map at all. The second part of the local habitat map is the areas that could become of importance for biodiversity. So again, we've got to be careful here that we can't just go, all of these areas we know are priority habitats, therefore we will map them. We can't use that indiscriminate mapping. We need to have a broad understanding that a measure could be delivered in the next 5 to 8 years. So that might be that if there's an existing project or a plan to deliver it, then great, we can capture that and map it. Or if there's a viable funding stream like biodiversity net gain, or if you're responsible for a green space, you own or manage one, or you have the capacity to influence the management of it, then we can capture that within the strategy. So in terms of timescales, what we're doing at the moment is pulling together that baseline evidence to inform the strategy. So the APIB, that's the area of particular importance for biodiversity. That's the first part of the map. We've got that because we know what we're allowed to map on it. And we're pulling out some high-level statistics on that in terms of how much is already protected, etc. We're having a piece, we've commissioned a piece of work looking at trends and threats and pressures on our habitats and species across Sussex. Excuse me, we've been doing this review of plans and policies and strategies, and then all this information is coming together to develop this description of the LNRS area and the opportunities that exist. So between March and July, that's really our core stakeholder engagement time. That's when we're going to be speaking to the general public, to groups and to parish and town councils, people like yourselves, to understand what the local priorities and measures are from across Sussex. And then in the autumn, we'll gather all that information together, write up the strategy, ready to go out to consultation in early 25, and then published in the summer. So in terms of engagement activities, we do have a new website. The address is here. It's literally just gone live, and it's not, you can't search for it yet, but if you type in this address or you follow the link on these slides, it will take you to the website. And that'll be our main means of communicating, if you like. On that, we have a public survey, which is our key way of capturing these priorities from as broad a range of people as we can. We'll be producing newsletters throughout the process to keep you up to date with where we are, how you can get involved. We'll be running county level webinars in May, and then we'll be doing some outreach to some of our hard to reach groups as well. For landowners and land managers, they're arguably our most important stakeholder group. So we've already started talking to them. We ran a sort of similar briefing session for them back in November, and we're taking a bespoke approach to conversations with them. So we're talking to existing groups of landowners and managers, and those are being facilitated by land management experts, so trusted experts in the field, if you like. And then for people like you, people who are active in nature's recovery, from community groups and town and parish councils through to non-governmental organisations, we have a more detailed survey. We'll be doing briefings like this, and then there will be workshops coming up in the next couple of months. So how do you get involved? Well, we see you as playing a very important role in the local nature recovery strategy. You're basically our gateway to the local community and to residents and groups and local landowners. So it would be great if you could help promote the strategies to your community, use your existing networks to help us do that. There is a detailed survey on the website. Again, the link is here. Please do fill that in if you can. If you could tell us if there's land that you manage that you think could be better used for nature, could be improved for nature. If you already have priorities or projects for particular habitats or species or places, please let us know. If you're already working with community groups or others for nature's recovery, please let us know. And we're very interested in these local green spaces. Now, we understand that there's various criteria for selection of these local green spaces, and that includes for their wildlife interest. So if you have within your neighbourhood plan local green spaces that meet those criteria for interest for wildlife, we would really like to know which ones those are. And please stay involved, attend these events, come along to the workshops, and we'll keep you posted about that as and when they develop. So I'm going to leave it there for now. If you would like any more information, I've put the 2 email addresses for the 2 local nature recovery strategies here, so please do get in touch. But I'd like to welcome Don and Julie now, and if Rob could talk us through any questions that we've had, and we will do our best to answer them. But thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. Great. Well, we've had a few questions come through the Q&A and the chat. So what we'll do is we'll start first of all. There's 1 or 2 questions around planning, basically. So what's the link between the LNRS and planning? And Lawrence O'Connor asked how much weight in planning terms would an identified area be given? So would it be a material consideration sort of on equal terms with the primary national planning policy framework? Which I think is possibly something for Don. Would you like to
ask Don to answer
talk about that?
I think you need to unmute him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go, Don. You should be away now.
Okay, well, ultimately, if I remember the question correctly, the concept of LNRSs have been designed to fit with the planning system. And it's important to remember that there's no additional protection added to any of the areas identified or any of the sites identified within these strategies. However, in terms of how it fits with the planning system, that all begins with the Environment Act, as Kate said, and that specifically states that public bodies such as local planning authorities must have regard to local nature recovery strategies in their decision making. And this has been picked up in the recent Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which of course makes changes to the planning system and as it updates the National Planning Policy Framework. As it stands, local plans and neighbourhood plans must take account of any local nature recovery strategy operating in their area. And in terms of basic principles, of course, being a matter of law, LNRSs are now a material matter in the planning process, but the weight given to it is a matter for the decision maker. And so each planning authority is likely to have a different take on its relative weight, especially when the matter is balanced against other national or local material considerations. And what I have to just reiterate here is this is the plan making process. This isn't determining planning applications. This is the policies that will evolve through the normal process of pulling a local plan or a neighbourhood plan together. We don't know much more than that at the moment. We're still waiting for the secondary legislation and the regulations to come in, the MPPF updates, and so on. And that will give us more specific information on how these strategies should be given weight in the plan making process. And the date for when that would come forward is still to be determined. I think the only other thing to say about planning and LNRSs is about biodiversity net gain. So you'll recall that as of a couple of weeks ago, 10% uplift on the existing biodiversity on a site is now required as it goes through the development management process. And when biodiversity net gain is not able to be met on site, near to the new development site, then ultimately the local nature recovery strategy will help to signpost some of that off-site biodiversity net gain to where it will do most good in an ecologically strategic way. Does that come close to answering your question?
I think so. So that, let me just what we'll do is if there's any further questions to come from the floor, if I could ask you to raise your hand, and what we'll do is invite you then to join the conversation. At the moment, all attendees are on mute, but if you as an attendee, if you raise your hand at the bottom of your screen, you've got the option to raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I can unmute you and bring you into the conversation. We've got a couple of other questions. They're coming through sort of thick and fast now. We've got a question here from Claire Hilton. Do the plans or mapping only cover existing areas, or is the idea to create new areas other than through SANGs?
Do you want me to have a go at answering that one, or do you want to take that, Don?
Oh, well, as soon as you've done all of the talking so far, shall I carry on? Ultimately, the strategy is going to cover the whole of the responsible areas. It's not just going to be the existing sites. And there will be 2 maps produced. One that does cover the existing sites of importance for biodiversity, and as Kate said, that's all of the designated sites through that entire suite of designations, plus irreplaceable habitats, at least as defined by the government. But then the second map will pick up areas that could become important to biodiversity, and the measures and priorities that will be developed with stakeholders such as yourselves will influence that. But just to make it absolutely clear, there'll be no individual sites designated or gaining any additional protection as a result of this process.
Yeah, so it comes back to being captured on that map. We have to have a reasonable certainty that these actions, these measures will be delivered within the next sort of 3 to 10 years.
And in what that looks like at the moment is us capturing all of the existing action and then working that, because this is the achievable action, because it's already got a policy attached to it, it's got a program, it's got money attached to it. So those are the ones that will go forward and be promoted within the local nature recovery strategy. It's not going to be imposing any action on anybody or any landowner.
Great, thank you very much. So we've got a question also around here around sort of achievability. So not much distinctive habitat can be achieved in kind of 5 to 8 years. So would an achievable measure include the introduction of, say, a 30-year BNG obligation for more ambitious habitat creation? So this is long-term versus short-term, I guess.
Yes, so it's not just about, it doesn't have to be there and perfect for biodiversity within that period, but the work to start nature recovery has to have begun, or we have to have a reasonable assurance that it can begin. So you're quite right. If there's if there is a legal agreement that says this site is going to be used for biodiversity net gain and it will reach this target condition within so many years, then yes, we can capture that.
Great, thank you very much. And
sorry, can I come in?
Please,
just
yeah.
A bit more of that is sorry if I'm repeating something you said, Kate, but this is the first iteration of the local nature recovery strategies, and in approximately 5 years' time we'll be asked to review it. So some of the priorities and measures that will be coming through will be long term.
Yeah, and one of the things that we'll have to do through the review is map where those actions have been delivered. So it may be that things that were on the second part of the map will shift to the first part of the map. Well, you know, we will come to that when we come to it at the review, but yes, things will move around slightly.
Great, thank you. And I suppose just staying on this theme for a moment is, in a way is, could you expand a little about how you would measure the success of the strategy?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. At this stage, our primary focus is on getting a strategy in place and building it. And as we go through that process, we will determine how we're going to be measuring the success of this strategy. These haven't been done before. This is a new thing. However, the intention is certainly to monitor success by database, by GIS, by something, but there are no resources in place to do that at the moment, and that's one of the critical points that we're trying to deal with.
Great, thank you. And how do rivers fit into this strategy? Is that something that we can talk about at this point?
I would say that rivers will be picked up. The priorities and measures that will be developed through consultation will pick up rivers and the specific priorities and measures that pertain to them to address some of the relevant issues that they face. And I say relevant, it's to address the issues that the local nature recovery strategy could possibly influence.
Okay, great, thank you. So there's one question coming. Let me just see who it's from. Just bear with me one moment. From Sue Leroyd Smith. I hope I've pronounced your name right. How can we find the designated sites in our local area?
Well, ultimately, they're the legal ones like SSSIs, SPAs, SACs, they're all available on the government website. If it's for parish research projects or anything like that, you can go to the Sussex Biodiversity Record Centre and they will give you a report on the designated sites within your area. And I don't believe there's a charge for that. That would be the most effective ways, I think. Kate?
Yeah, I think most of our districts and boroughs within their policy maps online include the local wildlife site boundaries. So you could also look there if it's the local wildlife sites that you're particularly interested in. Was there a particular slide that somebody wanted me to put up? Shall I do that now or at the end?
I think it's probably the best bet maybe to do it at the end. Is that right, Di?
I think so, yeah, just so we keep going on this for a bit longer.
Okay.
So I've got a question possibly for Julie. Will you be working with One Planet to map out all the projects in the area? As they're working on this at the moment. From Georgina Stevens.
Thanks, Georgina. Maybe just a bit of an explainer. So One Planet is a quite innovative new internet-based platform, which basically allows you to create a mind map of a plan or a strategy, and then allows you to connect that to other plans and strategies. And essentially the purpose of that is to see where people are working together on shared outcomes. So the South Downs National Park have been using it to try and map where different organisations and partnerships are working together to deliver shared outcomes for net zero. And as part of this process, we have been working with them on a little pilot project to try and map where some of the most important plans and strategies for nature recovery in Sussex are identifying objectives and priorities for nature. And we're looking to see where that is, where they're mapping together, if you like, so that we can identify who holds the same priorities already for nature conservation. So it's quite an exciting little innovative pilot. And certainly it does link to the question of how you measure success of the strategy. Probably really important to just note that the responsible authorities represented by Kate and Dawn are only responsible in law for preparing these strategies. They're not responsible for delivering them. The idea is that they're set out and then everybody else, you guys, environmental NGOs, partnerships, local community groups come together and do bits and pieces for nature to help to deliver them. Farmers and landowners obviously really important in there too. So how you measure success is essentially saying how much of it is eventually implemented. And one planet or an equivalent kind of platform where we can find out how all the different partners are getting on, doing little bits and pieces of work here and there across Sussex, could be really important in trying to understand and keep track of progress. But it wouldn't, you will understand if I say that, you know, for the responsible authorities to reconvene again in 5, 6, 7 years and try and figure out exactly what everybody's done is going to be a huge task without some way of monitoring it. So very live to that particular question. And one, Rob, can I just go back to the rivers question as well? Just
Please, yeah.
say that you'll remember from Kate's slides, it's really important to understand what's in scope of an LNRS and what it has a gift to do, and what's out of scope and what it really can't tackle. So rivers are a classic example of this, where the impacts and pressures on our rivers in Sussex are severe, and in terms of pollution and other sorts of things. Now we can flag those pressures in the local nature recovery strategy, and we can bring forward ideas for people's priorities to how to create new habitats, wetlands, and more biodiversity in a catchment or in a river system to support that river. But what we can't do through an LNRS is deal with the pollution source. That has got to be dealt with through the channels that deal with pollution. So it's a really good question, and it's a really good illustration of the role an LNRS can play and potentially what it can't do, because it relies on a completely different system to deal with the pressure created on rivers by pollution, for example.
That's great. Thanks, Julie. I suppose on a similar subject around sort of what the scope of LNRS's role is. We've got a question from Mark Kramer. Now, there's a particular situation reference. I doubt we'll be able to talk too much about a specific set of circumstances, but perhaps it's useful to talk generally about this point. So Mark says, we're in the consultation period for the Regulation 19 District Local Plan, and there's been an addition of a development that encroaches on a local inter-parish green gap. The development was rejected in our made neighbourhood plan. What role would LNRS play in sort of regard to mitigating this? Is that something that we can, is it something we can talk about generally in terms of the LNRS role in this kind of thing?
I think it comes back.
I'm going to hand that one over to you again, John.
Okay. It comes back to the scope of the LNRS. The LNRS has its own raison d'etre. It's got to produce a plan of areas that a network of areas that could become important for biodiversity. There will be sites within there where biodiversity is achievable on, and they've been offered up by the landowner. It is not going to be a tool, or it's not going to be very easy to use it as a tool to try and resist development. However, having said that, when a local plan is being put together, it will have regard to the local nature recovery strategy, but it will, what the local nature recovery strategy is trying to achieve in that area will be balanced against other needs and priorities, and the planning balance could easily fall onto the housing side as to the nature side. It's all down to the strength of the drivers at hand. Kate, is there anything I can add to that?
I think the only other thing is that, again, it comes that, you know, it's not going to help protect things. It's about opportunities. So it might, for example, if an area is identified as being a good place for nature recovery, if that site was used for biodiversity net gain, if the landowner was amenable to that, then because it had been identified within a local nature recovery strategy, it would get an uplift within the tool that's used to measure biodiversity net gain. So the developer or whoever it is would get a bigger bang for their buck. So it provides a sort of incentive or an impetus to, it would be better to do nature recovery strategy here or not. So it's not a constraint. It's not going to stop things happening. It's meant to encourage better things to happen in the right places.
That's great. Thank you. Anything else to add to that, or should we move on to the next question? Great. Okay, so there's a question here. Around, I suppose it's around process of mapping and what have you. From David Duke, are sites accepted by SDNPA as call for nature sites automatically included in the stage 1 mapping?
No.
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 Julie, did you want?
So the stage 1 mapping is, as I say, that's extremely restricted. The only things that we can identify on there are designated sites and irreplaceable habitats. And when we're talking about designated sites, that's sites designated specifically for nature conservation. So that's sites of special scientific interest, special areas of conservation, special protection areas, local wildlife sites. So it wouldn't be the whole of the national park or the whole of the national landscape. It would be a nature conservation site. So if it's that or an irreplaceable habitat, those are the only things we can map on that map. When it comes to the second part, which is areas that could be, again, we have to have some degree of certainty that something can be delivered. So if it's been through a process like the national parks call for sites for nature, that might be a mechanism whereby we say, okay, there's a measure, something could be delivered there because they've been through this process. But we've got to come back. If a landowner says that they don't want their land to be mapped, then we can't map it. We have to take it off the map. Did you want to say anything else on that, Julie?
Well, really just to reiterate that for those who don't know, the call for nature sites process that the National Park went through was essentially a call to landowners to bring forward sites where they would be happy to do something for nature. And then the National Park have enough resources to give them sort of pointers and advice on what it would be most suitable for and how they could fund it, etc. So essentially, it's a prime process for putting stuff on the second map. In other words, where could stuff be done for nature? Where are landowners really happy to do it? And where is there a possible funding mechanism? So maybe not the stage 1 mapping, David, but definitely likely where things have happened to go on the stage 2. And essentially, the LNRS is trying to do that, but for everywhere else. You know, where are people keen to bring things forward and deliver some priorities where landowners are keen to do it? So it's a good model to have had happen in our patch.
Great, thank you. So we're going to carry on sort of along similar lines. There's something like the Wheel to Waves Nature Corridor project that's been operating for over a year now. Does that already feature in the mapping of current sites? Where would that sort of fit?
Again, it doesn't. Bits of it will feature in the first part of the map if they're designated. But if they're not designated, they won't. But it's more likely that we'll be able to capture that in the second part of the map because there's already that sort of impetus. There's that desire to deliver nature recovery in those areas. So it'll be the second bit.
Yeah, the second bit's the ambition, isn't it, about where we want to do stuff. So that's really what that corridor is all about. For those who understand it. And you can go onto their website and have a look at their map and their ambition. And it's exactly that kind of thing that we need to be able to reflect in the second part.
Consequently, that's why they sit on the working group for the production of the LNRSs.
Great, brilliant, thank you. And now, question here so that was from Paul Oakham, the question around Wheel to Wave. So Steve Funnell was asking about sort of very small parishes. They've got no neighbourhood plan, but they do have 2 valuable green spaces, which are already being improved for nature. Do you only wish to hear from parishes which have identified these areas in their neighbourhood plan, or do you want to hear from all?
Do you want me to take that one, Kate?
Yeah.
It links back to Amanda's question above as well, Rob. If a neighbourhood plan has a policy regarding wildlife corridors, etc., how can the LNRS enhance and map what they've already envisaged? So just to let you know, we have read every neighbourhood plan in West Sussex and East Sussex. And in those neighbourhood plans, we've identified where parish councils have identified what's important for nature in their locality, where they have identified a policy, and where they may have designated green space where biodiversity or wildlife has been noted as a factor. So those go into the process, if you like. They go into the process of trying to set priorities and understand where things could be delivered. But if you don't have a neighbourhood plan and you haven't formally designated anything, that doesn't stop you from identifying what is important for nature in your parish. And if there are ultimately in the process will be an opportunity to understand where particular actions for nature can take place. And any parish council or town council or local authority for that matter is considered a landowner really in this sense as well. Because if you have land and you'd like to bring forward projects on it and you have resources to do it and communities to help, that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to know about. And even if you're not the owner, but there is the ability to encourage the owner along with the community to bring forward ideas, then exactly there'll be a time to hear about that. And in fact, in the survey, there's an opportunity for you to note things like that at this stage so that we can get back to you. So I encourage you to stick that information in there.
Absolutely, that was exactly what I was going to say. Please do, if you don't have a neighbourhood plan, but there is a site that you're already working on, or you've got a community group that's working on, please fill in that detailed survey, and we'll capture it that way, and probably come back and ask you more questions. But yes.
Sorry, Lawrence has just put something in the chat about emerging neighbourhood plans.
Yeah.
Guilty. No, we haven't actually looked at emerging neighbourhood plans, partly because of the sheer number, but. By all means, if your neighbourhood plan is nearly done and you think you're at a stage where you've flagged some of this information we've just talked about, do let us know again, put it into the survey and we'll pick it up.
And Julie, is that the case as well for the question from Ian Anderson above in the chat, that can a parish council offer sites for consideration in the project to benefit from advice and any? Yeah,
exactly. And it's the same sort of thing. It doesn't need to be something that you would even consider for local green space designation, but it might be a piece of land where people have an idea about what they'd like to do, and again fill in the survey and note interest at this point, and it's a great way for us to get a list of people to go back to for further information.
Great. Thank you. So sorry, just bear with me. So we've got a question here that if a site was designated as an SSSI in the past, but the wildlife once there has gone, would this be included in the primary map? We may have covered this already in some of the conversation.
If it's still a SSSI and if it's still designated as a SSSI, whether or not the wildlife has gone, then it would be included in the primary map.
Yeah.
Great.
And the thing we would probably also know is that Natural England, on a regular-ish sort of basis, monitor the condition of SSSIs. In other words, it will have an explainer beside it, which will tell us about its condition. So it'll be either unfavourable or favourable or improving, and it's an option to sort of flag existing sites as in need of improvement and in need of I guess investment, which potentially could be flagged in the LNRS. Maybe slightly tricky on SSSIs. They have technically they have legal arrangements with the landowners, don't they? And the landowners, that's supposed to be something that's dealt with directly with Natural England. So yeah, I think that's sort of, again, there's a specific regulatory government process to deal with that particular problem.
Okay. Great. And another one just on sort of on a little bit around neighbourhood plans and how LNRS can help enhance. If a neighbourhood plan has and forgive me if we've already spoken about this, if there's already a policy regarding wildlife corridors and chalk screens, how can LNRS help enhance a map what we've already evidenced? There's a reference to Southbourne Parish neighbourhood plan.
So we will have picked that up if that's a made neighbourhood plan. And we'll have picked up that that's a particular priority, and that's something that we will add to the, we'll add to the list. And then in particular, if there is an activity and action that the parish council is going to bring forward in order to enhance, for example, that corridor or create habitat within it, then that's going to be even more helpful. So hopefully we'll have picked it up already. And it'll be on the list. But again, just not a bad thing maybe to put it in the survey anyway, just to flag that there's particular interest in a specific policy that you've identified.
Great, thank you. And here's a good question around consultation. Vanessa Rowland said, will parish and town councils have an opportunity to consult on the final draft document?
Yes, so there will be a public consultation. So I think, are we aiming for the beginning of next year for that, Don, currently?
Yeah, Q4, yeah.
Yeah. So the supporting authorities, so our districts and boroughs and the National Park and Natural England, they have to be happy with our consultation draft before we go out to consultation. But there will be a full public consultation period. Yes.
We've been encouraged to try and get that consultation out as early as we can. The earliest date would be before Christmas. However, it's more likely to be in the sort of winter, spring after.
Great,
And
thank
again,
you.
sort of signing up to keeping an eye on the website, signing up to the newsletter. That is where we will let you know about key dates that are coming up, when there's workshops coming up, if there's a consultation process coming up. That's where we'll let you know. So do please check the website, or again, fill in the survey if you want us to, or register for the newsletter.
Great. And just completing around sort of questions around what will be in the plan. Sussex Wildlife Trust have lots of sites that they own and develop for wildlife. It's a question from Susan Nyfield. Will these sites all be in the plan?
Okay, again, that comes back to that. Yes, but it's which bit of the map they'll be on. So if they're a triple SI or a local wildlife site, they'll be on the first part. If they're on the second part, they will, if there's sort of a measure to enhance them or improve their management, then yes, we can capture that. We suspect, you know, these are the two official parts of the maps, but there will be lots of supporting information and lots of supporting evidence that goes along and informs those. So we're probably going to have an unofficial map somewhere within background documents, which will show exactly that. Where are the sites that are already owned and managed for conservation by people like the Wildlife Trust? So they will be there somewhere.
And it's worth saying, we'll be talking to every single equivalent organisation, including the Wildlife Trust, in great depth about what their plans are. You know, what are their priorities for the next, well, for the future, essentially. And they all do think about this. They don't necessarily write it all down, but they'll be really core and key to helping to shape this document along with everyone else.
Brilliant. So there's a question which I suspect the answer is that we won't be able to do much about it. But sorry, just bear with me. Just jumping between screens. It's around the Gatwick Diamond and a prediction of 14,000 new jobs. You know, where would we find housing for, say, 7,000 new homes? Now, as I say, I suspect that's not something the LNRS can address, but might be something that's worth us just talking around that side of things, of scope around that sort of subject. Don, do you want to jump in? And
that is a question I would have to defer to the planning policy team in each, because this isn't an isolated case, I suspect, in each of the relevant districts. So Crawley and Horsham, Mid Sussex are, I am convinced, will be dealing with that very question right now. How on earth is that going to be delivered, if indeed those numbers are accurate? And I suspect they probably are.
And it'll come back to that planning balance and the fact that the local nature recovery strategy is one of the material considerations, along with sort of housing need and work need, and so it's the weight which we don't fully understand yet, is it? So we'll take that away and try and find out and come back, I think.
Yeah, we might be able to add colour to that answer, but we won't be able to answer that. That is a question very much for the policy teams at the districts to answer.
thank you. I'm conscious of time. I think we're coming towards the end of our time. There's probably just time for one more question, I would imagine, at this point. But we'll ask this one and see where we land. And I would say, I think it's the case, isn't it? Any question we don't get to this evening, we'll provide an answer separately in follow-up with you. So from Paul Vidler, as well as deliverability within 5 to 8 years, what other criteria will be used to determine inclusion of sites, priorities and measures within the local habitat map? So what are the other measures aside from deliverability within 5 to 8 years?
Ultimately, well, I'm going to start, and then I think Kate and Julie will know more about this than myself. In terms of the actual sites being put forward where something can happen, then that is the ultimate criterion. In terms of priorities and measures, that's different. That's operating on a different scale over a wider area.
Yeah,
Kate?
so I think this there's a flow and there's a sort of sequence to the LNRS, and the first big thing we have to do is identify the list of priorities as a list of all the things that are important, that people value, that we should be working on in terms of nature recovery. And we've been advised in the guidance that we need to long list and then short list. And what's adding to that list is the big review of all the plans and strategies that we've been doing, but also all of this engagement. So the surveys, the information that you're going to feed back to us, what's important to you in Sussex as a priority, will help to collate that long list. And then there'll be quite a transparent process about how that's shortlisted. We'll follow government guidance and produce criteria to say as to how to develop a shortlist from the long list. And then measures are the things, the actions that you do to implement the priorities on the ground, and they'll be developed in consultation with people who know how to do stuff. So, for example, the priority that's given in the regs and the regulations and guidance is if a priority in Sussex is supporting our dormouse population, a measure to do that might be increased coppiced woodland, for example. So that's the thing you do. So there'll be a discussion with people who know about these things as to how to identify the measures. And then, as Dawn said, you have to bring everything together and figure out exactly where the best place is to put that, and where the best place is to do it, and who wants to do it, and who's willing. And that helps us create that map. And in that mapping, deliverability is something that has to be considered. So hopefully that explains the sort of train of thought.
I was just going to add to that, in terms of priority, some of the other criteria that might be factored in is, do they contribute to national objectives, and how much support locally they have. So if we're hearing, the same priority from a lot of local people, then obviously that means it's shared, and that's something that would be part of the strategy.
I'm very aware of time, so I hope this is the right slide that I'm putting up for Georgina that wanted a slide of the process. I hope that's the right one. Can you see that? Excellent. But on behalf of all of us, on behalf of Don and Julie and Di and Rob, thank you so much for giving up your time this evening to come and listen to us. We really hope it's been helpful. We will send around these slides. Please do follow the links and fill in the surveys, because we would love to hear from you. And please do sign up for the newsletter and things like that, so that we can keep you posted about future workshops and events and all those kind of stuff. Because, as I say, we really do see you as a key group. You are our gateway to the local community, so we want to stay in touch with you. But thank you for your time. We hope that's been helpful, and hopefully we will stay in touch. Thanks, guys.